We'll call the city council work session to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Biden?
Here.
Germaine?
Here.
Lamore?
Present.
Felder?
Here.
Whitman?
Excused.
Steelgrave?
Here.
Mayor Clark?
Present. So we have a work session. We have two items that are at least on the agenda, and we'll see where we go from there. Mr. Pastu, you want to review the first one, and we'll continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Both myself and Clerk Treasurer Michelle Lavoie will kind of walk through a little bit of it. I think in part there's the origin of this proposed ordinance is kind of a revisit of the food truck ordinance adopted, I believe, in 2016, and in part, how it fits in with, I think, a policy direction that council has expressed for more events, and certainly this would fit into part of that framework with additional events throughout the city, not just in the downtown. But you look at the ordinance and the structure of it, and I think the sense of it, particularly with Clerk Treasurer, we can probably streamline the process and look at the fees in order to encourage more and more vendors to participate in these different activities. And so, but at the same time, Clerk Treasurer, City Attorney looked at the hawker and peddler ordinance as well as the transient merchant ordinance as well, and the ice cream truck ordinance. And so we're kind of putting them all together to try and streamline the process and then just kind of revisit aspects of it. So if you'd like, we can walk through the draft itself with the understanding is based on tonight's discussion. We would put this in a form for council to consider it toward adoption possibly as early as 2 weeks from tonight. So.
Vince, is our, before I go into my comments, the plan is to bring the fees then in a separate resolution at the same time or after we pass the ordinance that is added?
I think we could do them the same, but clearly one of the direction is with the ordinance is to allow council to set those fees. And I think in a couple instances, there may be some discretion that you grant the clerk treasurer on some of those fees. But clearly have it adopted by resolution so you don't have to come back and do 2 readings to amend them in the future. It's just administratively that much easier. So that would be the intent for these fees.
Okay. This tightening up, so to speak, and consolidation of the ordinances we have for food truck, hawker peddler, and then ice cream, it'll help us not only license, but, administer more efficiently and probably in a more fair manner, because right now we have people showing up at the same event, but depending on what they're licensed under, there may be an uneven playing field in some cases, either with fees or with what they're required to provide to us, et cetera. So this will bring it all together, and hopefully not just for my department, but for the other departments that are involved in it. It'll just be one ordinance that they have to look at. For instance, public safety, it'll be one ordinance as opposed to multiple ordinances. But it should also make it easier for the customers, in this case, the vendors themselves. And we all have seen that vibrant communities, one of the elements that seems to be, and vibrant events, et cetera, is mobile vending, being able to come in and out of an area easily. Obviously, we're cognizant of the bricks and mortar business owners that we have here already, who in some cases, when this food truck ordinance was first brought into existence, we had Nick and Nino's, and Vince's were very active in it. Vince's is still here. So that, and Vince, I don't know if you wanted to talk about this, but that's why number 14 on page 7 and then G under section 15 were highlighted, because that's a discussion we have to have, if not tonight, at some point. So Vince, I don't know if you've got some thoughts.
Well, I think, not having been here when the original ordinance was adopted, that, a lot of times there is a protection, if you will, for brick and mortar operations, particularly in a downtown area. And I think initially there was thought that there would be a lot more activity and use for the food trucks in there. So in drafting this, a couple of areas were highlighted. The question being, do we have any desire to restrict the locations of ice cream, mobile truck vendor locations? And the other one, as the clerk treasurer indicated, was there where mobile retail vending units shall not be parked and operating from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. On Front Street from Cass to Macomb on the east end, and Washington Street from Loringer Square to Front Street. And again, I'm not sure the rationale of it. I think some of it may be just there's a lot more traffic during the week related to the county offices and courts, but also not sure if there was any kind of protection for businesses that may existed at that point in time. So I throw that out there. I mean, it is a policy discussion item for the council. And in fairness to Director Tolsted, I also think, when we do our special event applications, and I know that he works closely with the clerk treasurer's office on different permits, there may be some consideration that you give the public safety director related to traffic control, those type of things. So we don't have that built in here, but again, something that could work in conjunction with an ordinance.
Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. I think you're correct on the brick and mortar aspect of it. I think the thought was to protect the people that had businesses here in town. And now that we have 2 or 3 downtown, it's kind of like, I think that they would basically want more in to bring more people downtown. So I think maybe we need to relook at this and re-examine it and, ask these people that are downtown Amaya's, et cetera, Public House, Misty's, ask them what they think about something like this being brought in, establishing some kind of timeline rules or not, and kind of going from there. But I definitely think it needs to be revisited, and it's probably time to redraft it for sure.
So just a brief question, same page on page 7. I was trying, I just been, as you were going through and typing it, when I see a 15, it's unauthorized riders prohibited A and B, and then we have the A's through the L after that. Is that supposed to be under 14? It might have just got when you're moving stuff around. Like it's got vendors shall not operate, and is that like restricted area items?
Yes, it is.
Because 15 goes, and this is just a draft, I get that. I'm just trying to make sure when I'm reading it, where I'm thinking where you wanted it. Because unauthorized riders prohibited is A, B. It's pretty clear. They don't want to have unauthorized people jumping in the food truck and riding down the street. I get that. But then the other ones, some are about mechanisms of the vehicle, what's permissible or not. And then we get down to the ones that Brian just brought up, and sort of Mr. Pastu and Michelle, but about the retail on the corner. So was that intended to be under 14, or is there a different section?
So I can't speak entirely for Mr. Buds, but it probably was just the header wasn't.
Right, cut and paste.
Yeah, it was cut and paste, and the header isn't quite accurate. Although like I said, the discussion that Mr. Buds and Mr. Pastu and myself had was about making adjustments or removing altogether 14 and then G, and so it probably became a section that he thought, well. So you're right. If we did go forward with it, we'd need to change that header.
Right.
It's
Just a keystroke. Yep. I just want to make sure. I think I know what it was referenced to as far as a header for that. So I guess the discussion on when you read that about mobile retail vending not be parked operating 7 to 5 p.m. I'm assuming it's if it's from before was to for the established brick and mortar places that are not competing during the daytime, obviously evening. If we'd have to put in here, because we allow food trucks during our evening, of course that's in the evening events and stuff like that. So that probably isn't the case. So I look at the location. I think Brian's right. It's probably about those current restaurant locations, and if we decide to do that, I think it'd have to be consideration on West First from Smith to Monroe, only because we know what's there and maybe what might be there in the future. So that would be a consideration if we're going to, that we should restrict. If not, then we just remove it. I'm open to the conversation. It might be just a couple inquiries as well. I'm good either way on the conversation. I don't have a platform right now on this, so.
I like Mr. Lamore's suggestion, have a conversation. I think most of us have probably already heard from one of the restaurant owners downtown, and he seems to welcome the variety coming in and creating that synergy. But I just think a few conversations is probably a good idea. And of course, it's one of those things that if council decides to take the action to remove those, then, or give us the direction that they'd like the next draft to have that gone, it can always be added in if it becomes an issue. But I think the idea is that the more people we attract downtown, the more business that all the businesses will have. And of course, the food trucks aren't going to be here every single day.
No.
They're
Okay.
just not, so.
Other questions or comments? Andrew?
Thank you, sir. And I know that the clerk was talking about this in terms of the fee structure, and that's largely, I think, going to be left to her discretion. I think that's probably where it should be. But I think what we're trying to do in adjusting this policy is to make it fair for all parties. And in some ways, the mobile food trucks can help facilitate or supplement business where there might not be an adjoining business in the nearby area, and that's why we're trying to sort of control where they can operate more or less. But if it's a level playing field for all people, I'm sort of more okay with it. But the mobile food trucks, because they're not paying property taxes, they're not paying the DDA TIF funds. If there's a principal shopping district ever gets formed, they wouldn't be paying into that. So you have that burden of supporting downtown and its services and the shoveling, being supported by the brick and mortar shops, and then the mobile units can come in there and have an absolute advantage and just offer the same products at a lower cost because they're not paying those overheads. So I think the fee structure should be somewhat representative of that reality. And then eating up parking at the same time, which is probably the other reason why the locations in which they could operate were limited. But I would defer to the public safety director on that one, and I know he's probably been involved in this process. But apart from that, I'm largely supportive of the direction that it's trying to go.
So in the past, we've had a fee structure that took into account a brick and mortar operation, and they had lesser fees. In fact, they had nominal, if they did not have an application fee, for instance. So it can be done that way. There's a different variety of ways we can handle it.
And if I might, I think one of the things with the special events, so there's going to be, think of the food truck vendors in a couple of, actually probably 3 different ways, but one is where they might be serving an event, say at St. Mary's Park, or one of the things we'll talk about is doing events, at Labor Park in the future, those type of things. And okay, if you got a food truck vendor there, that would make sense. The other part is just parking them where you just have kind of a food truck day or something like that, and they just park in a location designated by the city for that operation. And then the last part is just a private vendor. For example, if a church has a special event, they're on their property. But I think all of them are just different. But a lot of the driver is trying to get a greater variety of food truck operators to show up to special events. And I think one of the deterrence is the $250 for one event. They got to make a lot of money in a short period of time, and many of them still have been through and qualified, with the health department to operate. And so the thought was, okay, if we can, relax some of those fees and encourage more vendors to participate, that you can do that. But
And it was less for a season, it was less for an event and as opposed to the season. So we did make that consideration, but I concur, we had that discussion with a lot of the food trucks that weren't interested necessarily in coming into an event because they didn't want to pay the $100 application fee. And I think you have to balance because they do make revenue. They do use resources when they're here. We've started to offer them potentially electricity, electrical hookup, that sort of thing. So we want to make sure we're not, it's not costing us more money, but these are all excellent points, and that's some of the balance. So we'll just bring back a well thought out chart of fees, and like I said, anything can be changed at some point. So, especially with the resolution for the fees.
Right. Yeah, I agree with Vince in the sense that you don't want to drive them out, you want to bring them in, because when they come in, so does everybody else. So we want to make sure that we have a lot of people downtown, and if we don't have enough vendors in here, they're not going to show up. So I agree with you on that you don't want to drive them out with fees. You want to make sure that it's whatever it is, it's something that's acceptable to them, that's going to make sense for us, and we both, we break even and the people come in. That's all we want.
I'm not even sure if we were to cost out the time of the clerk treasurers, we're breaking even, but it is kind of, just to process an application. At the same time, is it worth the investment for the community? And the answer is probably yeah. I think it is. So and certainly the clerk treasurer's office is willing to make that consideration. So.
Management of the food truck process is very time consuming, and it takes a lot of resources from the office, but I see the importance of it, and I see how it fits into economic development plans and a revitalized, not just downtown area, but use of our parks, et cetera. So continued, because our parks are really great. So I'm, as he said, the clerk treasurer's office is willing to do it, but the food trucks is the heaviest lift that we have.
Right. Yeah, just another question for you too. If they come in more than one time during the year, is that something that makes it a little bit easier on you as well?
So the easiest thing is if we can make the season pass attractive enough, then that will be between the fees and enough events. What I've experienced is they're willing to pay a $250 fee for a season pass. Only one out, they pay the application fee once, and we're planning to roll the application fee into the total cost. So they just are paying one fee. We're not going to break it up. But the conversation they've always had with me is, well, if I buy this season pass and you've only got one event that we know of so far, or two events that we know of so far, it's not worth it. So to your point, yeah, if I can get them in there and get them with one pass for the whole year and they feel like they can come in and out and it's not a lot of restrictions, knowing that they need to work with us, they need to work with public safety, et cetera, that would be ideal. So that's what we need to try to set up here, I think.
I know in section G it talks about, I just had it. Mobile retail vending units, which are not necessarily always food trucks. That could be any transient merchant, I think that the ordinance is supposed to be relating to, which would include any of our vendors for, say, the art fair, I believe. So we'll need to make it broadly applicable in this particular area that's drawn out is exactly the area that they'd be wanting to operate in. And then it doesn't discuss, it says 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., but it doesn't discuss weekday versus weekend. Weekday is obviously that area is going to be in use. Weekend, in terms of gathering place or a place for special events, we'd almost want people to be concentrated there. And then I can't see, so I think how we do weekends in special events is going to have to be considered. And then I didn't find anything regarding alcohol or mobile beer tents or anything like that. I don't know what we do right now for the DMBN's Beer Fest or how that's handled, or if we have to make special rules regarding alcohol.
So if I may, so transient merchant in section, where is it? It's right after the definitions. I don't know if it stayed in there or not, but under transient merchant in the old ordinance anyway, there was verbiage that covered special events, and it may not have made it into this. So I'd have a person selling an art fair, or here it is, art fair, festival, or similar event. so basically, you don't have to worry about the other things if you're part of the art fair, for instance, that sort of thing. For instance, they don't have to come in, each vendor, and apply now, and this isn't, the intent is not to change that. They just have to work with the
It's all handled through the
event
special event permit.
organizer, sales tax. They just have to prove to me that they pay sales tax to the state of Michigan, and then they're good to go. So, and that's all done through the coordination of the event sponsor. So, yeah, that's already kind of, it's handled in this, and that's been working well for years. Everything's been fine with that.
Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome.
Questions, comments, thoughts?
No, I just, I pondering a little bit that we may come back with something, where Matt highlighted the question about any restricted areas. I probably would prefer if there was something related to some traffic considerations for different types of food trucks. I mean, you don't want to put them on Telegraph or Dixie or any place like that. And so, I'll look through this again and clearly, if it's not, explicitly stated, certainly give the latitude with the public safety director to sign off on anything parked on the street so that at least that traffic flow, vehicle and pedestrian considerations are taken into account. So,
Your Honor, if I may. So in those cases, traditionally, especially Telegraph, but I'm not disagreeing with you. I think it's probably a good idea to codify it. But they've been in business parking lots at that point on
Yeah.
Telegraph, and they work with public safety. We've worked with them at the Napa store, for instance, and some other places. So, but I don't think it ever hurts to codify something
Yeah.
like that.
Well, I'm thinking in the public right away, not on the private.
Right, but
property.
they want to be in the parking lots on those
Yeah.
streets.
Oh, I think that's fine.
Yeah, on Telegraph, et cetera.
Yeah.
So,
No, I'm just thinking in the roadway itself. Make sure that we have some restrictions on that. So, anyways, we'll take a look at it though. But other than that,
That made me think of something. Along the lines of parking and space available, and not talking about Telegraph and that, but in the downtown area, is there going to be, how would they park on, if it was Washington or First or, there's parallel in some places, and there are obviously the smaller spaces in the truck, and then downtown is angle parking. We're gonna, if you designate spaces for that, then you can't park the other way. So it's just, I guess there's got to be some recognition if they're pulling up on the side of in the downtown and using space, and they start consuming 2 or 3 spaces, that allows for the truck to be there, which is great. That's what we want. But how do we manage that conversation then?
So we have a little bit of a precedence for that with the Santa Claus situation downtown.
Yeah,
and,
right.
And so how they parked, and I don't think initially a lunchtime is going to be an issue, but it's definitely something to think of long term. But that seemed to work out fairly well. It was a couple of spots, so we can kind of use that to come up with something potentially.
You already helped me, because I'm just trying to think what the response is when we get asked, and make sure that we disseminate the information to know about why that is permissible, what the objectives are. So, okay, I'm good.
there's actually a language in there, the exact
Probably
locations
is.
within the city where the applicant will conduct his or her business. So we can control where they go in that
All right.
regard.
Very good. Other questions? Oh, Deb.
So this seems to be just directed towards food, okay? What about the other people, for instance, that want to sell something else outside of a vehicle? Is this in this also?
The transient merchant, they would probably
Is
be
that-
considered a transient merchant.
Okay, well, I'll just give you an example. A few years ago, and there was a peddler's permit, apparently, but people would sell flowers outside their trucks or vehicles. So, and they would do it like on the side of the roads and that. So I didn't know if this is pertaining to things like that.
So I'm not aware of that in the city during my time anyway, but I know that happens in the townships. And I know we had someone come to us and want to do it here, and it didn't work out, which was okay. they would fall under transient merchant. And then at that point, we would have the conversations with them and with public safety. So this isn't a blanket. Just because it's here doesn't mean we would approve everyone for a sale the way they wanted it to be done. It would need to fit in here and with regard to our businesses as well. But they would fall under transient merchant for the initial discussions, yes. So it is covered in here.
Okay.
You know, a lot of those transient merchant permits are going to end up on private property as opposed to the city streets. But that's not to say it couldn't happen where they're selling something other than food. But again, similar process where we would have where are you going to do business, and so we can take some of the safety and the appropriateness into consideration.
I only issue one transient merchant license a year. I in the past used to do more hawker peddlers where they were going door to door. There is a transient merchant that comes annually to set up on Telegraph, but that's it. So far, we've only got the one every summer.
You know, follow up to that, I think the one item, it hasn't been for the last couple years, or probably the reason why, but in the past was the persons that would go down the street at the fair parade, because there's so many people, and they'd have the cart they'd push along with all the balloons and everything they're selling, and sparklers, and, you know, just items to wear or have. So that would be where I think that might come into play with the transient merchant, even selling water and stuff. So yeah, because they should be. And I recall we had that a while ago, and it was a challenge, and I know that police were involved because they didn't have permits, and they had all this stuff they wanted to sell in their cart as they pushed it along. So, Deb,
They used to like sell rugs at the Kmart on the corner of the street, plants, and it was in Monroe Township. So these are just, these are some things that, because people, they want to be able to sell anything because there's a lot of, the world's uneasy at the moment, So I'm just.
Yeah,
one-
it is in here, transient merchant. They'd be under transient merchant.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
okay,
And there are limitations. Transient merchant really is transient.
right.
The idea is they're not there for an indefinite period of time.
All right, Vince.
Your Honor, the next item is the review of the 2022-23 City Council goals and objectives. We met early February, here a month later, getting you kind of a draft that I'd like to walk through. A lot of them are just based on the notes of our meeting that Saturday morning, but also a few items that I've added. Has everybody got a copy in front of them to look at? Okay.
Yes.
So what I'd like to do is walk through it. There's 5 or 6 different goals, similar to what we've had in the past. I did put some things in there like an action plan, although we had elements of that previously with our goals and objectives. But let me walk through it real quick with you, and if you have questions, just let me know. The first one is reach all residents using media alternatives, website, social media. How about Medic? Cable, impact, newspaper, newsletter, door to door. And one of the things that came out of our discussion is explore feasibility of issuing citywide newsletter to begin in January of 2023. Egan has already started looking into that. And, to be honest with you, it may not be as impractical from a cost standpoint as we may have envisioned. And so more to come with that. She's scheduling another meeting with the company that would be considered for this. And so we will keep this going forward with it. But when she had worked in another downriver city, they did an annual newsletter, kind of a city guide for the year, and then quarterly updates that would go along with it. But usually the January one was the big guide for the city and contained a lot of information regarding community information, schools, churches, those type of things. And so interestingly enough, as we looked at Objective 2, and I was talking with her this afternoon, is develop strategy for communicating to community information to new residents, businesses, and visitors. And in many ways, what this newsletter in its format is actually the first one would contain most of that information. And so we may use that as a visitor's guide to, for at the Battlefield Education Center, the coming in from Ohio, the visitor centers, hotels, other key destinations. And so I think too, we can tie some of that together, as well as the new residents. Clearly what they want to know is information related to the community itself, and that January newsletter may be the one that has the most information, and we could, work with the distribution on that as well. So more to come on it, but it's already started in the works, and pretty positive that this may be able to find its way to achieving it. So the next item was continue with the brand installation implementation, installing new signs with our park projects. As you know, we're doing 6 neighborhood park improvements and incorporate that this year. We also are looking at painting the water tower and incorporating our new logo on that as well. And then conduct a citywide inventory regarding brand implementation needs. Sometimes you just got to go into a comprehensive, like, this needs to go, this is one that needs to be updated. And so there's an element of detail to it. So we've included that in there. Continue developing emergency information program. There's also a lot of things that have taken place. But I think also talking, as an action plan. This was actually a carryover from the 2021, appoint a public information official for the city. And I think, with Director Tolstead, we've talked about once we've get in place all of the reorganization associated with public safety, one of the things that we might very well do is have a person designated as our emergency management coordinator, but also within that operation have someone who functions as our public information officer. I think with our recent episode with the ice jam, both Miss Egan and J.D. Wall had worked in that capacity, dealing with the media. And so at any rate, it's just something that we need to do. The other part is it's already been implemented, is aspects of it, but to maintain our emergency notification systems. Again, part of that was initiated just pre-COVID, working with the county emergency management system regarding their notification process and kind of piggybacking on that as well. Plus our ability to reach out to employees as well, if there is some means of coordinating with them where we have their text numbers, so that if we got to send an emergency notice, we can do so. And then last, I haven't had a chance to talk with Millward, but certainly Impact's at a point where I think they're looking at their long-term plans, and it's probably timely that we also consider that as we go forward as well. They are a resource for communicating to the public, and I think certainly if there's a means by which we can mutually benefit from further with the existing relationship, it's something important for us to take into account. So, thoughts, questions?
Yeah, I think you might want to add a few more onto that besides Impact, maybe Monroe County Radio, any of our local radio stations that we have here yet, might want to implement something with them as well.
Okay. Thoughts, questions on any of the others?
Well, I think it's probably here somewhere. So basically, we have partnerships and partners we work with, and I think things that are going on regionally wise as well, with the Michigan Cornerstone, the Tourism Bureau really coming back into where they're getting they're getting closer to what we're talking about here. And I just say the partnership opportunities. That's all. And I think that's
And we may cover that a little bit later on.
it might
too.
be somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, thanks.
No, I don't have it in there, but I'm glad you brought it up. So it's.
Yeah. Your Honor, there's one other thing I was going to mention as well. As far as the newsletter goes, I'm all in favor of it, but it may be a difficult challenge this year due to the supply chain problems with paper and whatnot. A lot of things are not getting printed, and if they are, they're like a half a year behind.
Yeah.
So that could be an interesting little issue that we have to work on, and sooner than later.
Yep.
If we wanted to get something out by January 23.
Yeah, well, it is a goal. I mean, it's, certainly circumstances can change. One of my favorite quotes I came across recently was, stay true to the vision, be flexible on the details. And so that may be part of it. There are certain circumstances out there that are altering our expectations for delivering on some things. The next goal is economic and community development. Kind of a lengthy statement with the first objective, but I think I tried to capture the thought of the council based on the notes that I took, Mark and Jody as well. But it's develop a housing master plan strategy to encourage infill development, to assess senior housing demand, encourage remodeling and restoration of existing housing stock, encourage home ownership, improve quality, livability of rental housing, aggressively address blight problems, and preserve historic character of older neighborhoods. And the action plans associated with that is one of them is, as we've talked about with the reorg, is hiring a neighborhood development director to participate in the housing master plan strategy and its implementation. And then also to implement and expand the neighborhood enterprise zone ordinance that would also include a marketing plan to go along with it. So I think, capture a lot of it in the objective, but a couple action items in there I think are following up. And I think part of it is the housing strategy will drive some, and like any other master plan, here's the recommendations and the implementation plan that goes along with it. So I think more would come from once that's in place. The second objective under economic and community development is engage the Citizens Planning Commission in developing 2 sub-area plans annually, focusing on residential infill opportunities and redevelopment. As we talked about at our Saturday morning session, develop a sub-area plan for the Christiansey School site. Mr. Cochran certainly had some discussion with school administration related to that and the interest that is there with potential partnership. Also look at developing a sub-area plan for the High property. That would be, again, more residentially based. There seems to be some interest out there developing. And then, and those are 2022 projects. Develop a sub-area plan for vacant land on the northwest corner of the city near Munson Park. We talked about that, but that would be looking at a 2023 project, and then the sub-area plan for the hospital area in anticipation of their move to Frenchtown Township. And again, that would be a 2023 project as well. So at least put some timetables on this following our discussion. I think 2 of them, working with the Planning Commission, would be a reasonable time frame to do that. And I know that next week, actually, I think the mayor and Mr. Cochran are going to, meet with the Planning Commission as well as myself, talking about the direction that they would like to see them engaged in. I think the Planning Commission will be very receptive to it. So
Vince, I have a question, because I know that we've talked about these, and we already have initiated with a the Winchester corridor. Mm-hmm. Is that something as well as a sub-area plan? I know it's a lot of things, but I know we're already on the pathway, but tonight and other items. But
yeah,
so I don't know if we it was something we've already initiated, but I don't want it to be dropped off of with a timeline. I think would be, which I really like about this is it's clear, it's specific to the location and the time, and I think this is really good and something that we've already started that down the road, no pun intended, but what's the timeline we might be thinking about that?
So if I put in there a complete Winchester corridor, or actually we've been calling it Orchard East sub-area plan,
Right.
And its implementation, and put that under 22.
Yeah, Orchard East is better.
Yeah.
And then, if it's actually ahead of these, so
Yeah.
I would think we could put that right at the top.
All right.
Thanks. So I know there's interest also.
On
We've
the
had
planning commission?
conversations, we've talked about it, we've received
Okay.
information, and participation, partners that also have the same vision, so bringing them together in this process, as we talked about, is gonna be great.
So objective 3 is update city sign ordinance to include murals with special conditions to be completed by the end of the calendar year. I think that's on tonight's agenda, that we're looking with MKSK to assist in that development. And as Mr. Cochran would tell you, that the Zoning Board of Appeals made it very clear they would love to see an updated sign ordinance so they don't have to deal with those variances anymore. And it's necessary to do it at this point in time, so. Continue to, objective 4, continue support of revitalization of downtown. Again, working with the Downtown Development Authority to acquire and repurpose properties consistent with the master plan. We have some of those projects ongoing. I think it should continue on in there. Evaluate and update downtown parking strategy. As we mentioned at the Saturday morning work session, that there has been some ongoing work with clerk treasurer, public safety director, myself, Annette Knowles, the DDA director, and city engineer Patrick Lewis regarding that. And we're hopeful, if not, I'm not sure we'll be able to get it on the next work session, but here sometime in the next month, I'd like to bring that to a work session for discussion with city council. So, I mean, the downtown has changed so much in the last 2 years, particularly with one of our large employers merging, and that's changed their operations, as well as the pandemic is again altered kind of the flow of traffic related to work in the downtown. So, and then lastly is coordinate with DDA regarding infrastructure improvements. I didn't go into any specific details, but some of it may vary from the Riverwalk, some other improvements that they've been involved with in placemaking, and even, I had some discussion with Ms. Knoll today talking about, maybe a participation with the MLK Bridge, which I think is a pretty cool project once we get that rolling there. So we may find some sources of funding, 2 or 3 of them. So at any rate, Objective 5 is to continue evaluate funding and facility operational improvements for the River Raisin Battlefield National Park Education Center. Clearly, we have a meeting scheduled on Saturday 26th to have part of that as a discussion along with the reorganization of Parks and Rec as well as economic development. So, yeah.
Oh, Andrew?
I don't know if it belongs to the action plan or just an amendment to what's written there, but something about continuing to work with our local and regional partners, and then seeking external funding opportunities. Because I know that we've done that with the past. We're not the only people with an interest in this property. There's a bunch of people that have been helping us towards that effort, and we want to make sure that we continue working with them and not give the impression that this is solely a city's effort.
I could put some language in there to continue to evaluate grant and donation funding, for facility and operational improvements. So incorporate that in there.
Thank you.
Objective 6 is participate with Mdot in the planning and evaluating alternatives associated with I-75 reconstruction as it pertains to interchange improvements. The Pell process, planning, environmental linkages is currently underway. Recently, Mr. Cochran, Lewis, and I think Mayor Clark have sat in on some meetings, and that process is kind of just kicking off at this point. But it's important to keep it on the council radar because sometimes momentum picks up pretty quick, and that we should continue participating in that process. So, any questions on economic and community development?
See none?
All right. Quality of life initiatives was discussed reactivating the Arts and Culture Committee. Objective 2, expand upon existing community volunteer projects. It was kind of a theme I picked up from the council, and I thought, from an action plan standpoint, let's continue and let's recognize two very successful volunteer projects, that being the river cleanup as well as the Cultivate Community Project. Those are two very, very successful and widely participated projects. And the second action plan would be to consider adding additional community-wide volunteer projects, maybe one this year. It may be more practical to start because there's such an effort to get one rolling, is that maybe the first one would start in 2023. But the point of it is you got two really successful projects, and again, it's again working with a number of community partners to initiate, and both of them, one through the Cody and the other, with a number of agencies and affiliates. So I might just put two because I got a ton of. I don't think 2022 would be practical at this point. It may be. I'll just change it to one if you're all right with that, and we'll try one next year. All right. Parks and Rec trail development. Again, this is already underway with our trail committee. One is complete the 5-year master plan by December 31st. That's a practical consideration given it would get us eligible for DNR grants next year cycle. The non-motorized plan, again, have that completed. We are contracting with Manick & Smith. Lucy Fortin is really engaged. They've got a pretty good agenda coming up this next Wednesday. The Trail Advisory Committee on a number of tasks to move forward on that plan development. Complete construction of Carnes Park by June 30th of 2023. I think that's a practical date for it to be completed. We may get started this calendar year, but for it to be completed, I think substantially completed next year would be more likely date. Complete the Complete the playscape replacements in the neighborhood with the 6 that we have there. I should list what those 6 are, and I will before I bring it back to council for adoption. But I think, talking with the Parks and Rec Director Loretta LaPointe, she's already engaged with that process. And so, again, like everything else, there are some considerations related to supply chain issues. So, and then I put in there the action plan. The last one is to begin design in 2023 for phase 1 improvements to either Mill Race or Manor Park. I mean, there's been kind of a general discussion with council. Hey, let's get one in the hopper all the time. And I use phase 1 because the parks plan that were adopted in, I think, 2017, had some pretty significant improvements proposed for both Manor and Mill Race Park. And I think in some ways, if you went with the first phase, that you can get accomplished quite a bit, and particularly with Mill Race, it'd be maybe more tailored towards some of the grant projects through the DNR. And so by completing the master plan and starting the consideration for the design work, we can, I think, start moving for potentially having a project in 23 or 24 for that. Objective 4 is expand the number of community special events and implement a communication plan with that. Coordinate with community organizations and nonprofits to expand the number of community special events with the objective of having one event each month, April through December. We already have quite a few. Clearly working with the DMBN. They have a number of projects, but also there's other potential venues outside the downtown, and certainly that we should try and consider those as well. Initiate, there's a lot of them actually at the education center that could take place and have in the past. Initiate at least one event each summer in Labor Park to attract families, such as a movie night or a concert. And similarly, beginning in 2023, try and set one up for Carnes Park. I start with one just to get things going. You may be able to do them more frequently but we get something initiated. And again, sometimes if you got a good successful event, it attracts sponsors for future endeavors. So, and then lastly is it's in the capital improvements program for this next year. And again, we'll be submitting the budget here late at the end of this month. But to purchase a mobile stage during the following fiscal year that would start July 1st. And I think having that available for events throughout. Thoughts, questions?
Ryan?
Yeah, the mobile stage, did we sell the one that we had?
It's no longer,
It was no longer
yeah,
usable?
yeah.
Okay.
Although I can't remember, I can't remember what our disposition of it was. I'll find out. Goal D is, I put in there to ensure that in 2035, all city infrastructure would be in good condition and sustainable for another 20 years. This kind of goes back to some of the capital improvements concerns I expressed regarding our largest taxpayer, DTE. Not sure what the long-term future holds, but clearly as a community, it would be desirable to get our infrastructure in a good workable condition with the understanding that that future is not as clear as we would like it. I broke the objectives down into parks and trails. Try and update all of our neighborhood parks. I think there's a good allocation going on now with the CIP to continue those upgrades, and then to implement non-motorized planned projects that will come out of this from the Trail Advisory Committee, utilizing various grant sources and also the 2 mil levy for project funding. So we do have there is a lot of grants out there, both public through the state and feds, but also private donations. I know that the loop trail that the county outside the city is involved with has got a large donation that's coming from a private foundation. So there are alternatives out there. So road projects continue the annual evaluation of conditions of streets and plan for their resurfacing, reconstruction, or capital maintenance. As you know, basically it's the Pazer system that Mr. Lewis and Bill Walters, the DPS superintendent, evaluate the street conditions. But more importantly, I think it doesn't all have to be capital projects. There's crack sealing and slurry sealing that could be successful in extending the life of the asphalt once you have a good program in place and it's well thought out. So I may reword that so that it uses the Pazer evaluation, which is pavement assessment. And then just implement the 22 and 23 road improvement projects. And again, with tonight's agenda item, you'll see that the concrete paving bids came in actually lower than the engineer's estimate by a couple $100,000. And they met the responsible bidder certification. So again, we may be able to expand upon that as well. But at least we've got an implementation. With water and sewer projects, continue the copper and lead monitoring and comply with the regulatory requirements related to the service replacement. Coordinate water main replacement projects with planned street work, which is always ongoing. And I know Mr. Leroy and Mr. Lewis are always going back and forth trying to figure out how to fit projects into the CIP so that the timing of it is that the underground is always going first. The action plan also is continue with the sanitary sewer projects related to the corrective action plan by Eagle. Big undertaking with the utilities department. And so just keep that in mind is that, and in fact, part of it, will certainly be involved with trying to reduce the infiltration into our sanitary sewer system. So the other part of it, as I included public facilities and had kind of a broad action statement, evaluate funding alternatives for Navarre Library and Opportunity Center project. I think it's important to keep that out there on the radar. I know it's already happening. Just nothing definitive has taken place with that, but we do need to keep that out there. And then the other action plan is related to police station is that, initiate here shortly, task force to evaluate feasibility, I should say, of constructing, and I caught that earlier and didn't fix it, of constructing a new police station. The focus would be on program needs, location, and financing. Clearly, I think in order to go forward with this, there's probably going to have to be a dedicated millage to go along with a debt obligation. So the goal would be to have a millage ballot initiative on either August 22nd primary or November. When I drafted this, I got thinking, well, if we did August, you literally would have to have ballot language by May. That's probably too quick. So I think a more reasonable time frame would be to have something ready for the November general election. And at that point, you'd be looking at having some language in place, probably no later than the end of July or the first meeting in August. I'm looking to the clerk.
I looked that up a couple weeks ago.
Did you?
You're about right, I think.
Okay.
It might have moved back a little bit, but not significantly. But
Yeah.
I'll double check that.
And so if you don't mind, one, if you're okay having this as one of your goals on there, I would change it to August. I just don't see it as there's too much to work on in a short period of time. Having it completed by sometime midsummer would be far more reasonable and practical. Thoughts?
Specific to a date, if it was by, it would be options, but I agree, it's probably time frame wise. It would be a significant challenge of bringing all together that we need to do and have a schedule on that. I mean, it's March now, so.
Yeah.
Andrew?
Yeah, two questions on infrastructure before we move on. The first is, as we talk about non-motorized neighborhoods, especially as gas prices go up, and we're going to all be trying to drive a lot less. First of all is mass transit, and second of all is non-motorized, either walking or biking. And I think that you only can get so far through the trails. At some point, you're going to have to revisit not the zoning ordinance, but the actual zoning of the city in terms of, we don't lay out in good ways, the places that you're trying to get from and get to tend to be pretty far apart. So focusing on more mixed-use integrated systems that have people living close to where they want to work or shop or what have you, and then having a trail system that facilitates that use, I think is great. But when people are trying to get from one side of Telegraph and having to travel several miles or kilometers on their journey, it's not really conducive. So I think that an evaluation of our zoning is going to have to happen in the long term. And then secondly, I know that our utilities, our water and our roads coordinate very well together. Pat Lewis and Barry Leroy do a wonderful job about that. I have heard some complaints from residents, though, about streets having to be ripped up when gas lines were put in after the fact. Now, I know that the gas lines, that's not us, right? But I'm wondering if we could coordinate with them better, if they could coordinate with us better, if we give them our timeline ahead of time and be like, hey, we're scheduling this stuff years out. You know when we're doing what. You guys, is there a way that we can work it out where you're not coming behind us and
Yeah, that already happens.
Oh,
And
okay.
It you can just see me kind of bristling now because it is phenomenally frustrating where they know in advance what the plans are. And then once it's in place, now you want to do this, and you had the opportunity, because there's always, in a lot of cases, pre-construction where all of the utilities are invited to a pre-con meeting to go through, okay, now's your chance if you want to do, replace, any underground utility, whether it's natural gas or any other underground service that may take place. And so it's a legitimate problem and very, very frustrating because you put a lot of money into the road system, and then you've got somebody that purposely doesn't pay any attention and then now wants to rip it up.
Because we do capital improvements 5 years in advance and have a comprehensive study of every single road, every single part of every single road in the entire city. They know what we're going to do and when we're going to do it.
Now that you got me wound up, that's okay. Actually, there's a city that I heard, if you come in afterwards, you're going to pave a half mile from your project area. And they enforce it. Now, how they get away with it, I don't know, but I'm going to tell you, you may get an ordinance one of these days that contemplates that, because you just, if you put a patch, the patch doesn't last, as you know. You just have to have a length of continuity with asphalt or even with the concrete. So, I just, it's something that, I'd heard one community did that and was very intrigued by it. And so it may be something we actually look at, because it would be the incentive to pay attention. Sorry.
Is it a lack of visibility on them, or they're just not employing any government relations people to monitor this stuff?
There's far fewer than there used to be, I can tell you that. A lot fewer. They were very engaged.
Because they're not saving any money by having to go back and rip all this stuff up.
Well, no, but at the same time, they were going to rip it up and put it back in place, but they never quite get to the same quality. That's why I say I think this half-mile requirement is intriguing to look into, because that'll get their attention. If you're going to, after the fact, come in and do something like that, then you should, restore it for the long-term benefit that the project was initially in place for. So.
I just want to end on a note of our people do a great job.
Yeah, it is, but it's a sore subject. It really is, and a legitimate sore subject. It's.
Brian?
Maybe impractical, maybe improbable, but also put on that list maybe electrical people, Detroit Edison, ITC, somebody like that. Give them the opportunity to look at something like that to maybe they want to bury lines. They always say that they don't have enough money to do it, but there's no better time to do it when the street's open.
Yeah. All right. Anything else? We talked quite a bit at our work session regarding use of information technology to improve customer experience, workflow processing, electronic data collection for operational decision-making. The first objective is develop and implement a camera installation plan for safety monitoring purposes, but also to monitor traffic and parking flow, and in some cases, showcasing public events. We do have a plan that we started, and one of it was focused on the downtown area, St. Mary's Park, the riverfront parking lot there as well, and connecting back to that. I think we did put some funding in for this current year with using ARPA funds for that purpose, and so. But I do think, we've identified a handful of other areas for these camera installations. And again, it's not just for security monitoring. These things are getting, as you know, sophisticated enough where they can do traffic counts and circulation. And, I know that public safety is recognized that there are certain key intersections like Telegraph and 7th where there are more high accident, high impact potential areas. And so there's, but I think it would be, continuing on with the initial phase, and then look to implement and keep submitting them through the capital improvement process in the following years. The second objective is develop an organization-wide comprehensive weekly and monthly reporting system that includes some operational and project narratives as well as performance indicators. You already, as a council, get quite a bit of reports from our departments regarding their activities. And what I'm thinking is, and I talked with Miss Egan a little bit about it, and we need to put it into a framework, but rather than getting all these separate reports with different formats, different fonts, let's put it into something that'll have kind of a consistent look to it that would provide you on a monthly basis activities taking place within the departments, and so that there's one email that goes out, and that would be it. And the other part of it is too is again, you get weekly reports. There's weekly reports that go out regularly. I think Mr. Lewis probably does more with that than most. But a lot of communities actually run an administrative weekly report that goes to council, but also they post on the website for the community. And so if we look at doing a format, so part of it is using some of the technology that's available, but also putting together also some communication to the community as well. So, it's one of those, it started off looking at the key indicator, performance indicators, and then I got thinking, there's some other applications to it as well. And then I had, on the third objective, expand the use of Laserfish to the public for various applications. We already are doing some of that now with the licenses and permits, but also I think for FOIA requests is a recent example, so we'd look to continue with that as well. But I got the sense that there was some interest in like a read-only aspect of it for whatever information that we may have out there. So that was just on my notes. And then just to expand the use of GIS for informational and management purposes, we discussed the tree inventory, and it pertains to existing species, which is already there, but also in their condition, along with trees that have been removed. And we had some discussion about that as well. We can use the GIS, maybe if not the GIS, but some electronic application that would allow someone to look at the historic taxable value of properties. You look at something like, I'll just use a online service, Zillow, where you can see what past property tax payments are for homes, that type of thing. So we'll pursue what applications could be found and incorporated there. And then the last I had with the GIS is to implement a public safety data format similar to the Fitch used with their analysis, taking the data from central dispatch that involves the different types of calls and response times, and start putting it into a format that can be used for management decisions and that type of thing and responses. So we paid a consultant to do that, but in many ways that's something that we should be able to tailor as well. So I think that would be an excellent application going forward. Thoughts, questions?
Nope, see none.
And then the last part, the last goal is just dealing with organizational development, customer experience focus. Again, carrying forward from our 2021 goals is implementation of the public safety reorganization, maintain the excellent response times. That part was in the 2021 for services in an efficient manner consistent with the council resolution adopted in July 2021. Also carried forward was develop cadet and entry-level staff, pursuing that a little bit further as alternatives to bring young people along. And also develop a plan to recruit and retain diversity of staff. Again, a lot of this got by the wayside with the pandemic, but certainly I think, it is a worthy endeavor to pursue. Objective 2, customer experience training. Again, through the pandemic, reinstate the programming that was started prior to that. And again, keep doing some refreshers and new programs related to that. We were doing in-service programs every 3-4 months with our employees, giving them updates on policies, procedures, and just general related items. And need to get back to that again as this is winding down, hopefully. One of the things through Mr. Cochran, Ms. Egan, and Clerk Treasurer Lavoie, they talked with me about providing through our office just a weekly update to City Hall employees for upcoming community events. Again, it's in the concept of everyone's an ambassador, and the more that people are aware of upcoming programs and events, the better they can be prepared should somebody come in doing business here as to what is taking place. And then also as last is just to develop ongoing training program for frontline supervisory personnel. Again, kind of started before the pandemic, but clearly there's an ongoing need for that as well. So having said that, a couple minutes. I know I went through it real quick, but
Brian?
If I can go back to the GIS real quick,
yep.
is it possible to inform people of which homes are in the flood zone and not?
I think it already has that capability.
It's on our
yeah.
mapping. You just hit the floodplain map.
Because that always is an instrumental tool when purchasing a home or selling a home.
Yeah. No, I think it is an application that's available. I'm almost certain it's on there. I mean, it's a layer on the.
Talking about.
It is a layer.
Okay.
I know Mr. Cochran and I a couple times were talking about properties and recently with just looking where they were, people were and that, and they ask. And so it is one of the layers that can be put on our
I think
city
it'd be
mapping.
wise to do that. Just if you're going to do the historical value, put that on there as well, so that it's almost like a full disclosure type of thing.
All right. Okay, Michelle?
Under Goal F, the action plan for the developed cadet, is that under the umbrella of the public safety program? of
Yes.
Police and fire?
Yep.
All right, thank you.
So Mitch, I have an item. It made me think of it when you went over the customer experience, and then it's always about, us externally, but also I think about internally. I look at Public Safety Director Tolstead there, and something he came in and provided other information for staff as well, staff development or awareness. And maybe if it's not there, it may be back under the emergency information program, kind of revisit with the employees on workplace safety items and just a protocol review. I know we had that, I don't know if it was under communications or under the presentations to employees, but my thought is that the opportunity to, there's things that go on, and we just should make sure our employees are well prepared. We've took care of things here in our restructuring for their safety, but also just that educational information. We have new employees, but also, it'd be a good refresher.
So if I may, Your Honor, I'm going to add, returning to our in-service programming that we had, and Director Tolstead provided active shooter presentation to all city employees, and I think that was well received and appreciated by the employees. And so if I put that in there on a general, there's those type of issues. If I just get back to doing in-service programs, because it doesn't have to be policies and procedures, but just different. We had one that we dealt with First Amendment audits and how to handle those type of things. So there are different things out there that we can do with the programming for our employees. And so I'll just and we do it across every department, not just.
I think that's great. And I think we'd have different, that in-service program for different locations, because we have more than one location where our employees in a large number are working from. So I think it allows them to know their front door just as well as the front door here. Any other questions or comments? Brian?
Yeah, it's just something that kind of came to my mind this week was, in the past, we had a mayor pro tem, I believe it was Councilman Ike Langely at the time, and he is now no longer here. Who do we have that serves in your place, and how do we go about doing that?
Well, it's not necessarily the goals and objectives, but it could be.
No, it's not. Just something.
Oh, sure.
this
I'll
is
be glad to
something
bring it up.
beyond
So
that, yeah.
I remember, I'm going to go back a couple of years at least when it came forward, and I know that Councilman Vining also made a recommendation, and Councilman Eckelangi chose not to be the mayor pro tem, but he said, well, in the past there was a assignment of council members. So I went back and researched it and looked back to the old records, and while it was proposed at a meeting, it was never implemented. So I would have kind of taken the approach of, and I'm more than willing to talk with employees with the council about mayor pro tem position, but I also know that what some of that entails doesn't fit with the scheduling. So I've tried to pick the locations and time and opportunities that I know a council person is going to be at, that they themselves can speak on behalf of the council. Not speaking for me, we're speaking for council. I know I'm looking through, Councilwoman Vining has spoken a couple items. Councilwoman Germaini did. I think Councilman Felder has. Councilwoman Moore, your turn is coming. Councilwoman Steelgrave. So I've tried to take that approach. But there was, I think, an opportunity when I was away from the chair for a moment, and Councilman Michelangelo stepped in. I was at that point. So I'm more than welcome to have the conversation. But what that entails also with that comes, not just maybe possibly running a meeting, but also attending things in the community and trying to make that work. If I was gone, I would make sure that happens, but I'm open to the conversation. I've thought of it. There was something on here, but I don't remember what it was now.
Is it the Cornerstone events that we need to put that as a communication item, or because I put that, I'm going to add that on, with the
Communications, you mean?
yeah,
I had
the calendar for the Cornerstone.
Yeah, the tourism in Cornerstone, but I think it was somewhere in there. My thought is, if we're talking about a strategy for communicating the community information, I know that we're having input into the direct input into the Michigan Cornerstone events. There's now a website that they're taking input to meet that tourism and the Cornerstone's marketing of events countywide. But so we're utilizing that currently. But I think as we evaluate some things that are related to these items that were listed, how do we get the information to new visitors? Maybe it's even just providing that from the city, we have it here, but there's also a location in there for the county Cornerstone, but they're working toward an app. There is an app actually on that now, so to go in and see it. No, that wasn't it. That's okay. Other comments or questions?
If you're okay, I can make a few changes here. You'd be comfortable with me bringing back at the next meeting for council to adopt these as the goals and objectives?
Yeah, I think the work that was on that day that we met on Saturday, and then now, of course, this is a good review. I will say if there's any final thoughts that a council person may, review this, please send them to the city manager, and he'll bring them back as an item for consideration. Yep. But yeah, we'll look forward to this. Thank you.
Yep.
I have a note here, but I'll see if Mr. Bastu, if you have anything further.
I have no further, I think, for the work session.
That's it?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to, Clerk Lavoie and I met on one of our agenda items, and just some wording that needs to be clarified. So as it comes forward, I'll get you to the direction of the page of the agenda, and I'll let Clerk Lavoie share the comment. It's on under council action, item 3448, just some language that probably be more appropriate or desired by the clerk to be read. So I'll let you explain, and then we can go through it.
On page 3, on item 3448, the ordinance that we're considering tonight for approval and final adoption. When the motion is made, if the motion could be made to place the ordinance on the floor for its final reading rather than moving to adopt it, because as we all know, we go ahead and read it, and then we move to the adoption phase secondly. So if we could just do that, it's just a little housekeeping item, but it would make the process go more smoothly. So move to place ordinance 22-001, an ordinance to amend 127 retirement system ordinance. You can leave off of the code of the city of Monroe or say it, that's up to you, on the floor for its final reading.
So just to review, make sure I got it correct. It's remove, adopt with place.
Correct.
Strike out of the code of the city of Monroe at the
Correct.
end, and then state on the floor for its final reading.
Correct, because we're placing it on the floor for its final reading, and then we'll move to the adoption.
Language things that we usually have, and it just came this way, so just, so whoever makes the motion, and if there's this, and the support knows that, how it should be read. So.
Thank you. Like I
place-
said, just a little housekeeping.
Yep, on the floor for final reading. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I guess I'll take the opportunity to see if there's any conversation from council regarding any items. I know Mr. Passy usually asks that. We have about 5 minutes or so, or a couple minutes, I should say. It's now 7:20. I guess seeing none. I think we're done. Okay, at this time, I'll close the work session, and we have 10 minutes before the council meeting.